Good morning. So I have been forced to stand within this small square, which those of you who have heard me speak before is probably the most difficult thing, right? And it's one of the things which is a part of what I'm going to tell you about the topic for today, which is storytelling to win clients. So my basic premise here, and the reason I've been called here is because I give very long speeches. And then to tell me to speak within 15 minutes, right, is the first challenge. So the first thing I want to start off with in terms of storytelling is please remember there are 3 characters in every storytelling session. What is that? There is a storyteller, there is the listener, and then there's a story, right? So the first thing for everyone to remember in telling a story is to keep all the 3 people in mind. Because we often tend to get involved in that story, in the facts, in the figures. When you are meeting a customer, right? What do we know about listening? The best speakers are the best listeners. So in the storytelling session, it's important for you to listen to the audience. So what does this mean? Before you set up the storytelling session, right, which is maybe you're going to an IT company and you're talking to freshers there. Maybe you're going to college, you're talking to graduates. Is understand the audience, because your story has to be tailored to the audience. If you're going to just speak from your end, it's going to go way above their head. So I would say that before every session, you get a feedback of the kind of audience. That's number 1. And I wouldn't mind if you actually circulated a questionnaire on what the audience wants to hear from you as a speaker. So that's step 1. Step 2 is focus on yourself as a speaker. You should always circulate something about yourself to that audience so they are mentally prepared to hear from you. They shouldn't be coming blindsided, because then you lose the first few minutes in just trying to figure out who is this guy, what's he saying, is he worth listening to. So second is prepare a biography of yourself, talk about yourself, your YouTube, your Facebook, what you do, circulate it to them. Now we come to the third part, right? When we talk about these 2 people, I'll come to the story the last. Remember that every audience listens to the story from 3 spaces: the eyes, the ears, and the heart, right? Because remember one thing, in the process of storytelling, many of you are aware of this concept of the left brain and the right brain, right? The left brain controls our right side of the body, which is the logical, mathematical, calculative element. But the right brain controls the left side, which is the artistic, intuitive emotion, right? And as you would have all realized, you're all experienced MFDs and distributors in the business, people invest emotionally and not rationally, right? So the point to remember is that your story should appeal to all the 3. How do you achieve that? You achieve that through multimedia, right? So you have to use visual imagery, because you cannot engage the audience by appealing to only one dimension. That's put up a slide presentation there. Second aspect, since they listen to all the 3, my style, it doesn't work for everybody. My style is to minimize speech from a podium as much as possible, because your presentation is out there and you're here, your voice is here, his eyes are there. Right? So I try, those who know of me, I always try to wear a lapel mic and move with the audience so that the consonance between the eyes, the ears, and the visual image is there. That prevents a disconnect, right? Second point, please remember, right, that story that you're telling, right, also has got to have a blend of fact and fiction. Now, why do you use the word fiction? Fiction because facts are what you're going to tell him about long-term returns, the India growth story, say that India's, disconnected from the rest of the world, this is a demographic dividend. You'll do all that falana on the facts. But those are not the things which are going to trigger him to become your customer. So then what is it? Let's all remember, right, we are all dream merchants. Right? We are all selling dreams. What for? To fulfill aspirations. And those have to come through fiction, because there is no fact. Yes, you will have practical examples of skin in the game, where you yourself started investing at a young age, you have not been able to buy something big, you can relate that. That's fact. You can talk about some customers of yours. Yes, so there is some element of fact. But ultimately, since you're selling dreams, you have to focus on the big picture, and the big picture is fiction. It is fiction which could turn into reality. It's your belief, but today it's fiction, right? So using that big picture to convey your points is absolutely important, right? So from that point of view, if I can request the organizers to play the video 1, where the simple thing like power of compounding, right? There's something that Sundaram Mutual used years ago
There
to
once
convey
was a
this.
poet
So maybe
who fell upon such hard times that he was no longer able to feed his family. So he decided to set out for the palace and appeal to the generosity of the king. Upon being summoned by the king, he started reciting his poems.
Wow.
The king, well pleased, asked him to name his reward. Pointing to the finely wrought chessboard, the poet said, "Your Highness, if you place just 1 grain of rice in the first square and double it for every square, I will consider myself well rewarded." "Are you sure?" asked the king. "Just grains of rice and not gold?" "Yes, Your Highness." "So it shall be." So the courtiers started placing the grains of rice. 1 on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, 8 on the fourth square, and so on. By the time they came to the 10th square, they had to place 512 grains of rice. By the 20th square, the number swelled to 5,24,288. When they came to the halfway mark, the 32nd square, the grain count was 214 crores, 74 lakhs, 83,648. Soon the count increased to lakhs of crores. Eventually, the hapless king had to hand over his entire kingdom to the clever poet. And it all began with 1 grain of rice. Moral of the story? Never underestimate the power of compounding. If you systematically invest a small sum every month, your SIP can grow to a very impressive sum when you retire.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
So I hope I made my point, right? Nobody is going to expect your money to double every year, right? But the concept of power of compounding gets communicated when you talk big picture. So that's why I said blend fact with fiction. This is fiction, but it conveys the point of view, right? The other thing which is very important, right? I've spoke about using audiovisual imagery. I've spoken about taking the big picture, but now let's focus on the storyteller, right? The storyteller is as important a player in this act as the story, as the audience. Why do I say this? Because it's the power of your words. It's the power of your thing. So your communication has got to be acceptable. So first is focus on yourself. Why? You can't. The level of preparation needed is 10:1. Believe it or not, that's the time it takes for me. If I'm doing a 1-hour preparation, 1-hour presentation, it takes me 10 hours to work on it. Because that's the homework you need to do before you come on stage. So that's point number 1, preparation. Second, your attire. How do you attire yourself? It's got to be tuned to the audience, right? If you're going to an tech company, go there in your jeans and t-shirt, because they will relate to you that way. If you're going to a more professional gathering, make sure you dress professionally. So the way you attire yourself says 100 things about you. Third is when you talk, it's very important to make eye contact with the audience, because no talk is successful until it is listened to. And unless you get that eye contact, you will get feedback from key members of the audience on whether your message is getting through. Otherwise, the audience is dull. And that's the reason I walk around, because then the audience's face and eyes move with me, they don't go to sleep. Right? So engaging the audience, understanding whether they are understanding you, that will reinforce your conversation. That's very important, right? Finally, I would say that as a speaker, right, the time that you take over the storytelling is very also critical, has to be tailored to the audience. When I do distributor meets where my audience is there, I know they are eager and hungry for knowledge, so time is not a constraint. But if you're going to an IT company, he's got a limited amount of time. So you've got to make sure that you're communicating and don't overstretch the time. Communicate the time beforehand and don't overstretch, right? Now, I want to speak about something else, right? Is that when you use facts and figures and imagery, the point is that you have to correlate this to non-investments. Because for people, investments is not their way of life. It's something that he hates. He's avoided planning, financial planning, and he would love to spend his money. You're trying to bring that audience as your customer by getting him comfortable. The route to that is to appeal to him through day-to-day things which he can relate to, right? So when you prepare videos, and like I said, every storytelling session must carry a few videos, without doubt. Like I said, you've got to engage the eyes and the ears. And when you do that, try and use things which are hatkese, which is completely removed from just talking, saying Indian economy, nominal GDP growth, this will grow, right? Take the audience's attention out so that he can then correlate what you're saying to reality and day-to-day life. So if I can have the cue to a second video, this video is something that we played probably 12, 15 years ago. The product no longer exists, but it was a super hit because it conveyed it in very briefly what 1,000 words could not say. So if I can have...
Sumo wrestling is an extraordinary sport that requires a combination of stability, agility, and power. The wrestler who manages to throw his opponent outside the ring is the winner. This means that sumo wrestlers are necessarily enormous in build, so that their center of gravity lies closer to the ground and makes them very difficult to dislodge. It is sheer size that gives them that immense stability. However, they are also very powerful and surprisingly agile. Size, power, and agility work together to defeat the opponent. The sumo wrestler is a perfect symbol for the PSU. Huge, stable, powerful. And when PSUs become answerable to investors through listing, they become surprisingly agile.
So we were launching a PSU fund, and we want to talk about the sheer size. At the time, Manmohan Singh had brought out this whole disinvestment for the first time. How do you convey that point, right? By this, you are able to convey the size of the PSUs, the flexibility that it comes, and the strength, right? So using something completely different from the investment arena, we're trying to make a point about the key attributes of the fund, right? So I would encourage all of you to think about those dreams and figure out your own videos. The YouTube is filled with multiple such stories. But take things which is in a frame allegorically, right? When he looks at that, he thinks about this, right? So I think I would like to end my session. I think for probably one of the few times in my life I'm within time, right? But I hope to summarize, right? For me, what? Remember, there are three players in the act: the storyteller, the listener, and the story. Second, remember that we are dream merchants selling dreams, so focus on the big picture. Third, a listener listens with his eyes, his ears, and his heart. So use emotions as blended with logic to appeal to that. Use audiovisual multimedia so that you're engaging all the three, eyes, the ears, and the heart. Fourth, don't become dry and focus only on the subject matter, but try and use real life non-relatable situations which bring through those points as a thing. Sixth, make sure that you have examples of skin in the game, where your own investment you started early, how it's helped you meet, or if you have customer examples like that, convey that. And seventh, please make sure that you take an audience poll beforehand so that you understand what the audience wants, so that you tailor your presentation to them. Next, when you finish, it's very important that you summarize things like I'm doing now in a takeaway. Because what people heard in the beginning, they would have forgotten by the end. So always close out the thing by summarizing all the points that you said, so that that's what is fresh in their mind. And finally, if possible, give them a takeaway, something they can carry forward, which they can look at home as a summary of your presentation, as a gist. If you give out a handout, then they will go back home and they will look at that. Thank you very, very, very much, friends.